most of you know because we're a little tiny. She did her undergrad work at Mary Hardin Baylor studying ceramics, and she has worked on several different proposals throughout the course of her time in the intro or the proposal class, where she was working with ceramics. Then she kind of looked at working with the community in her trip abroad, and then she came back and was looking at community. And so making all of these different, they keep coming back together with people and ceramics being central. But she's done a lot of exploration, and this is the current iteration of project that she will be working on and heading for a December graduation. So she has not done, she's working on data collection, she'll explain this. So she's working on data collection now while she's revising the project and coming up with how it's gonna, what the shape of it. But again, the exploration of connecting with people through art has been central to all of the different iterations of the project. Arianna has worked with START, the pre-college art camp that was here at UT. She has been a research assistant for round 2 of a faculty action research project on EDI resources, where she shared her own work from her undergraduate show, her ceramics work. She shared that with Round Rock ISD teachers, and they were very receptive to it. She's currently doing an internship with Landmarks and volunteering with Mobile Loaves and Fishes at the Community First Village. Do y'all know it? Some people know it, some people don't. For formerly unhoused, so it's a community of tiny villages where she leads lessons or leads activities with our class programming. And we hope you enjoy hearing about the project and where it will lead from here.
Okay, so as Steiner said, I'm Arianna, and yeah, surprise for those of you who didn't know, I'm graduating in December. So this project is going to be a bit different than the rest. This is more so the process that I'm at right now. There is not an actual project to show yet. And as Dr. Jennifer said, this project has gone through many iterations. It's changed to a different research question entirely, changed back again, and then gone through many different iterations of it. So just to start with, I just decided right now to ask this, but how many of you have experience with ceramics? Oh, okay, most of you. And is there anyone who wants experience with ceramics who hasn't had it, who wants to take a pottery class? Okay, good. Okay. Good to start. Why ceramics? So my project focuses a lot on ceramics education, and I realized in starting this research that there are a lot of gaps in it, especially just looking up the word ceramics in a database. It'll show you a lot of engineering things about ceramic materials that they use and not ceramics in art education. So I just think that that's a really important distinction and thing that pops up when you look it up. You have to look it up in the context of art education. You'll just get a bunch of articles about science which are not pertaining to this. And then also ceramics, I'm planning on exploring different ceramic places around the Austin area. So those that offer studio spaces or workshops or different things that they offer. Also for ceramics, it is different than other mediums like painting, to where it needs a physical space for you to do it. You need to have a slab board or a mat. You need certain ventilation so that the clay doesn't get into your lungs from the dust, and you need certain tools and kilns that you wouldn't have everyday access to unless you happen to have a kiln at your house. And then I'm providing and educating people on these spaces that I talked about that center on ceramics, because that's also a huge gap where people don't know about the studio spaces or about different places where they can practice ceramics, and that's speaking personally myself. I'm also where are these places that exist? And what people? Who is this targeting? When I was talking about the different people groups, I was trying to center on a demographic, but I didn't want it to only pertain to a certain group of people. I wanted it to be accessible to everybody. And so we determined that it was between beginners, intermediate, and expert. And so for beginners, it would be novice learners and teachers, or people who are outside of the art field in general. My brother is best friend, he really likes plants, and so he was asking me how to create a pot because he just wanted one for his pets and said that he wanted to try getting on the wheel, and so it's just an interest that he had. And so when he said that, it immediately like triggered me wanting to do this project for people like him who don't take art classes. He was an engineering major here at UT, and so he didn't have like the time to schedule for that. So where did those people go to learn about ceramics? There's also intermediate, so a lot of you have experience in ceramics, so you've probably taken a class or two or done a studio workshop, and so those would be those people. And then advanced would be more so like people like me who took a lot of classes in it, but are possibly new to an area like I am and don't know the studio spaces around Austin that offer you kilns and materials to work with. And another part of my project is zines, and Laura's talked about this earlier, but why I'm using zines is because I'm reflecting on my process of creating a series of zines, and I like zines because by definition they are made for distribution. They are meant to be distributed anywhere, and they're supposed to be easy to make, accessible to everyone. Children can make them, older people can make them. There's no like strict definition of what it has to be or look like. I also like the DIY aspect of it. That's also pertinent in ceramics as well. And I myself am a more tactile art maker. I don't really like graphic design or technology-based art as much. I prefer to do things with my hands. I even like hand building in ceramics more so than wheel throwing. And so I wanted to focus on a capstone on an art project with something that I could make. And so I'm looking at the zines aesthetically, not just as an instrument to get this information out, but also as the project itself. And then for engagement, I liked how Dr. Adejimo said it to me during one of our meetings. He said, if someone picks it up and reads it, it's a success. And I said, well, good. Since one person reads this, then that's good for me. Okay, and my connection to the project. So as Dr. Stacker said, this was my senior exhibition in this picture, and it was focused on different, it has a bunch of different cartoon characters on it, and they were portrayed to look like me, to talk about representation in media. And so I had a series of about 13 mugs in it. So I have a background in ceramics, but I also took a few classes in book arts, and I've taken a few workshops here while at UT. And the thing I like about book arts, again, it's more tactile, but also I like writing, and so it's a way to combine both of those two. So my goals with this project in particular, we're going to find somewhere where I can practice my craft, somewhere to learn and or teach. I'm in the education program now, but I don't come from an education background. And so being able to say that I did ceramics and I do have these areas where I have learned how to teach ceramics to people. And then doing zines and ceramics allows me to practice my passion of writing and art. So my research question is, what is my learning experience creating a series of zines for those interested in ceramics? Okay, and the problem we're facing in art ed. As I said, the history of ceramics is very scattered and all over the place. Usually when I find sources on it, they're really old, and so they're very outdated. There's also, just at UT alone, most of you probably know that we don't have a ceramics program here anymore. And that's not all across the board, but even for programs that do offer ceramics, it's usually not really required even for studio majors. That's one of the classes that they have to take. And I know that in my ceramics program, my teacher was responsible for bringing in a lot of art majors to our program. There were a lot of people who would take ceramics for fun and ended up picking up an art minor or something. There were a lot of people who were pre-med and they were like, I don't want to drop that, but I'll pick up this minor. Or there were people who would just take a bunch of ceramic classes with them because they found it really fun. And I think with it being tactile, it's very therapeutic practice that a lot of people enjoy. And then information on ceramic spaces is like a huge gap. If I do find anything on ceramics, it's usually just about education in schools. It's not about the places specifically, and I plan on staying in the Austin area after graduation, and so I'm focusing on Austin. I wanted to funnel it down to at least that, if there wasn't like a certain demographic, at least to a location. So I'm focusing on places in Austin. Okay, so for my methodology and analysis, I'm doing narrative analysis. So I'm going to be doing narrative is full of notes and sticky notes that I'm taking, and so after I read an article, I'll look at what's the context of that today and how is that going to help with my project. And then also voice messages. I really do like writing things down. I have sticky notes all over everywhere because I can't keep everything in my head. But doing voice messages, I realize I really like as well. It helps me to process more what I'm doing. And so something that I've started with my volunteering at the art house for Community First Village is I'll make voice messages about my experience there with the people in the studio and things that they're learning. I also want to do journal entries because, again, I just like writing, and so it's an easy way to be able to look back at my notes and see the things that, key terms that like stick out repeatedly in my research. And then also, another thing that Dr. Arianna pointed out when we were looking at this project as a whole is that it's about information sharing and not the process. At first when I started this project, it was about teaching people ceramics, but I realized even with my background, I'm not like an expert in ceramics, and so I more so wanted to teach people about different areas where they can learn. And I will also put my own information and things that I know in some of the zines as well, but it's mostly about getting information out there to people. Okay, and then for my literature review. So for ceramics education, what are the gaps? The history of education is hard to pin down, and this is because ceramics in general has had a long debate of whether it's art or craft. And so this is important because in schools they didn't see it as fine art, and so it wasn't included. The sources I found, it said that ceramics, recognized by American museums as fine art only within the past 70 years, ceramic pieces are still often relegated to the category of decorative art or craft. And so ceramics is seen more so, as I said, as a decorative thing, and as craft, like as Lauren said, like into fashion and fibers, even clay. I realized that in your definition was like at the bottom. They didn't mention ceramics at the beginning of it. So ceramics is still being introduced into fine art practices. And two key people that I found so far in my research are Courtney Lee Wida and Billy Sessions. One of them, they had an article over craft in general, and so even that article that she wrote, she talked about ceramics in a bit of it, but it was mostly over crafts as a whole. And then for the other one, she was talking about where ceramics has been and where it's going, but again, that article was only 2 pages, so it wasn't really delving into the history as much. And then zines. So what are zines? Zines are very varied, so to say. And so all of the readings I found focused on a lot of different people groups who use them. I found one article that talked about nurses and how they would create zines in order to like talk about what they were going through in their day with other nurses there. And then there were articles about children using them in classrooms. And I had also gone to a couple of workshops, as I said, here at UT, and there was one that I brought my friend to who was a speech pathology major, and when we got there, we realized that half of the people in the workshop weren't art majors and didn't even know what zines were. It was a master's student from NYU, and she was doing her thesis work, and it was a large zine that she had created that had lights and everything. It was really cool. But she led a workshop, and it was really cool, and it was open to everybody, and it was free. So zines started off as fan magazines, and they were created basically for people to be able to share about different fandoms that they liked and different things about it and to get information out. And then in the 50s and 60s, there was a growth in the underground press, and they were used as a source for people to give their voice to people outside of mainstream media. And so it was used in terms of like protest or getting out the word on any social movements that were happening at the time. It was an easy way to get information out. So like I said, it's free to make. Most of them are easily remade, and they don't have to be like published in the strict sense of the word. So this is a typical 8-page zine. This was the first one I made. I made it this is not the one I made, but I made one when I was on the bus on my way to school, and it took like 10 minutes. It's a very easy fold, and I didn't have scissors, just tore it with my hands. But it's a very basic one that they use. There's also little signature books that they make with sewing. and that was the one that we learned in the workshop. And as I said, it was a lot of non-art majors, and so even if you didn't have a lot of sewing experience, we also learned how to make the signature booklets. And then this is just an example of one that I found off the website, and this was one made by kids. And I think it's really cute. They use a lot of different sources, and it just shows like the range of people who can make them. And so the biggest part of my project that has changed is in adding this community aspect. I'm taking an arts and community service class. We have our case studies and CEAE class right now, and so I was learning about a bunch of different community spaces, and I realized that my project up to this point was focused on me and my process with learning, and it was focused on what I knew about ceramics. And so I didn't really find a lot of passion in the project because it didn't involve anybody else, and so involving this community aspect was really important to me because ceramics as a whole is very communal. Looking at a bunch of different ceramic places, they all were collectives or studios, and none of them just showed people's ceramics work. They all had a call, or they had like an apply sheet for people to join their program, and they were like, doesn't matter if you have any experience, if you have a lot of experience, we just want people to join us. And so I like that aspect of ceramics, that it's very communal. And then accessibility. So I am using the definition of the quality of being easy to obtain or use, but I am aware of the DEAI in this. In my class, we had a few people from ArtSpark come and talk to the class, and he was talking about the different programs they had, and I asked them if they had a ceramics program. They were like, it's hard because they're both so niche to find people that have experience in both. And so that's something that I want to look at in the future, are different areas and how to open up those avenues. But that's very broad to look at right now, so it's another further avenue of research. My theoretical framework is constructivism, just because I'm focusing on how I'm learning and my learning process with this, which I think is really important, especially for us as educators, to know how you learn, because it does affect how you teach others. And so what about the project? I don't have pictures of a project to show you, because I don't have a project, but I have a possible zine topics lined up. So we first said that I would have an intro zine just to introduce myself and the project, and then I've decided to focus on 3 different locations. So one is the Doherty Art Center, and they actually have a ceramics artist in residency program that I'm applying to this summer, and hopefully I get it, because it's good in that it allows you to have a studio space. They provide materials for you, but you also have to teach a few classes. So to give me experience with making the art, but also getting to teach others. And then Feats of Play and Cafe Monet Art and Play Studio are both also just other ceramic places that offer different workshops, studio hours, and they cater to a spectrum of learners. And then another aspect I wanted to focus on was DIY tools and design ideas that you can do at home. Because as I said, this is a place where you would probably need a studio or somewhere to work, but you can take pay home, which I learned during the COVID. I got quarantined during my senior show, and so I had to start my project making it at home, and so I learned how to do that. So that is possible, so I want to have a zine focused on that. And then just on ceramics vocabulary, there are 2 small books I checked out at the library for ceramics. They were both from the 1940s and 50s, and they're like this tiny. But I learned something new. There's something called bisque firing in ceramics, and they called it biscuit firing, which I didn't know was the shortened version. But it gave me the idea of doing like the biscuits and gravy of ceramics or something like that. I think it would be a cute idea. Suggestions for future research, as I talked about the accessibility aspect that I'm not touching on right now, but I think would be great for future research. Further dissemination, I'm planning on making these zines, and I want to make them in a way to where they will also look good in black and white so that they can be copied by people, because I do like the paper aspect of it as well. Other locations that offer pottery, like I said, I'm volunteering at the Community First Village, but that our house is for the residents there, so the formerly homeless people. It's not really open to the public, so ceramics pottery places that focus on a certain demographic and letting people know about those. And then there are other spaces, like there's a collective down the street from my house, and they don't have kilns there or ceramics, but they told me that they want to learn ceramics and that I could bring clay and teach them. So also spaces that are open for studios but don't cater specifically to ceramics, and places that would like to have ceramics. And then different data collection tools like doing surveys if you wanted to cater to a certain demographic, like what do teachers want to know, what do specific teachers want to know K through 12. What have I learned so far? The importance of community, like I said, in ceramics, that's very important, but also to me is where my passion lies in how people learn about it, and then knowing how I best analyze information, and then also getting to know about the different ceramic places around Boston.